Next up is your 2012 league champion, Ryde's Blåkillinger. That was my best attempt at it. Um, Looking across his roster, he's in pretty good shape at every position, although he's getting a little older. And we're going to dissect it a little bit piece by piece and see his chances for 2013. First off, at quarterback, he's got Eli Manning, and that is Eli Manning and his tired arm to go along with Andy Dalton and Matt Castle. I will say that Manning is a fringe quarterback one at best with all of his issues last year. It's hard to trust him as much more than a low upside starter, in terms of fantasy anyway. But that being said, he's in good shape with Dalton at his backup. He probably played Dalton some in 2012 because Andy Dalton has his numbers have gone up. He actually had a relatively good sophomore year. A lot of quarterbacks have, what they call the sophomore slump, but he did not. Dalton improved quite a bit in year two, and I don't know that his ceiling is as high as a Breeze or a Brady or something like that, but he's a very good quarterback too, and he's got some upside, especially since they've added new weapons like Tyler Eifert, and Sanu should be healed up. So the things are looking good for Dalton. He'll probably start more games than Eli Manning for Righty this year. Matt Castle is just a guy. I don't think he'll get much PT over in Minnesota now behind Christian Ponder because they seem pretty set on him. Over at his running back position, he has a great 1-2 punch with Alfred Morris and Arian Foster. Foster is a top back still. He is getting up there. He's not old. I want to say he turns 27 this year. That's not old. He has a lot of tread on his tires these last 3 or 4 years, with 300 plus carries to go along with a good 50 receptions, something like that. He's got a lot of wear and tear on him, and I know that a lot of people think that the wheels are going to fall off pretty soon. I don't think he's headed for that yet. I think he'll have a plenty productive 2013, but after that it's time to start being concerned. Still, he's a great running back one for at least 2013 and certainly helps Righty's chances of repeating. Alfred Morris, I heard he picked him at 412 last year, last pick in the draft, and that panned out pretty well for him, as Mr. Irrelevant, as they call it here, the last pick in the draft, turned out to be a great RB2 and a fringe RB1. He's going to be a great player for Blåkillinger at least as long as Shanahan sticks with him. And it's tough to trust Mike Shanahan, but it looks like he's fully invested in Morris. If there's one thing I would be concerned at all about, it'd be Roy Halou getting a lot of third down work because he catches the ball very well. After those two, things get a little bit more dicey as he has Andre Brown, D'Angelo Williams, and Ben Tate. Andre Brown and Ben Tate I both view as about the same guy. They have upside if something were to happen to the starter, but as it stands, they're just handcuffs. I know some people believe Andre Brown is going to get a good bit of the playing time, but I think it's the David Wilson show in New York. They didn't draft a back, and I think that's because they fully trust Wilson, and if they have to, they trust Brown. But I think they're trying to hand David Wilson as much as they can because he showed some real good glimpses last year. He also has D'Angelo Williams, like I said, but I think D'Angelo's on the downswing, and I'd be surprised if we see 700 yards from Williams this year. So at running back, he has a good one too, but beyond that, things are a little bit troublesome. We have to hope there's no injury to Morris or he gets benched inexplicably by Mike Shanahan because Righty would be in trouble. At quarterback, like we said, he's probably got about a B+, I would say. Now moving on down to wide receiver, he has Wes Welker, who has since moved on to Denver, which I would not say are greener pastures. Brady had that safety net in Welker, and he trusted him. Now, Peyton Manning, I'm sure, will learn to trust Welker, but I'm not sure that he'll be quite as invested in him as Tom Brady was. He took sort of a side grade at quarterback going from Brady to Manning, but that trust factor, I think, is something they need to consider. And I'm not sure that Welker eclipses 100 catches again. I think he's going to be more of an 80-catch, 1,100-yard guy, maybe 5 or 6 touchdowns. More of a wide receiver, too. Productive, certainly worth starting for another year or two at least, but I think he's on the downswing. And then we look down his list. He's got Jeremy Maclin and Cecil Shorts, both of which I think are more wide receiver 3s. Maclin is a good player, but he's been an enigma this far. Last 2 years ago, I remember he had that weight issue in the preseason, and he never really recovered. Last year, he got dinged up a little bit. The Eagles were in flux last year. They were in trouble. And they have Chip Kelly, but I think that's going to benefit Deshaun Jackson more than anyone. I think Macklin's production will stay about the same. On down to Cecil Shorts, I think Justin Blackmon is going to emerge there in Jacksonville. And I don't believe that Blaine Gabbert or Chad Henne can feed two mouths and make them both productive fantasy wide receivers. Shorts, I feel like, is probably more of a 60-catch, 800-yard guy, which is still good. I'm not saying you cut him, but I wouldn't feel real great about starting him week in and week out. He's probably, as his roster is, his wide receiver 4 is going to be kind of a combination of Anquan Boldin and Ruben Randall. I like Randall in 2013. I think he showed some flashes last year. And now that they have Ramses Barden is gone, I'm not really sure what's going on with Dominic Hickson. He might still be a Giant. But honestly, it doesn't even matter because Ruben Randall is immensely more talented, and I think he'll be just fine. You may have to wait a little bit, but I think he has the potential to be a starting wide receiver and a starting fantasy wide receiver. Anquan Boldin is on the opposite end of the spectrum, but I think he's a bye-week flex guy at best. Then he has Lance Moore and Joseph Morgan. And I like Morgan's chance, or at least I should say I liked Morgan's chance before the draft, but then New Orleans went out and got Kenny Stills, and I think he's probably the favorite to win a number 3 job now, because I really like Stills. He also has Dexter McCluster, who's just a guy. So all in all, his wide receivers are solid but not spectacular, and he has some age. I think he might be looking at a wideout in the draft. We'll see. At tight end, he has Vernon Davis and Jason Witten, both, again, guys that are 20, 29 or older, but very productive. I think as his roster stands, he's probably going to be flexing one of these tight ends every week. And that's not a bad thing when you have a tight end like Jason Witten or Vernon Davis that you're going to flex. They have a lot of upside, probably more so than his other flex options, which would be Randall or Boldin or Andre Brown. I think Vernon Davis would probably be your best bet for the flex, unless he gets somebody to start with his 112 rookie pick. He has the 112, and then he has some third-rounders. I would say with the 112, he's going to be looking at best player available, honestly. I think a great player to grab there would be maybe Robert Woods, or if one of the big 5 receivers fall. If he's fortunate enough that Keenan Allen slides, it'd take me 5 seconds to get to the podium and call his name. Even a quarterback, I wouldn't rule out Geno Smith, and running back, again, I'd be looking at a guy, maybe Zach Stacy, if he's there. I like quite a few guys at that 112. It's a very deep draft. He can get a starting caliber player there. You just have to make sure you draft carefully. I wouldn't be looking at a guy that's going to take a few years to get in to his position, because I think Ryde needs a starter, or at least someone that you can play at some, spot start in 2013. So I wouldn't be looking at a Quentin Patton or something like that. I'm looking for a guy who could play now. All in all, I would say that he's got a pretty dang solid team. I'd say it's probably a playoff team. I wouldn't call him a championship favorite to repeat, but I think he's in pretty good shape. So that is Ryde Blåkillinger, and good luck.